Black voters, white voters, any voters in any community ought to expect out of both parties an argument, what's best for me as an individual American voter.
Well,
and
your
so to try to
argument
group people together and say you all are forced to vote for one kind of a candidate, aka Democrats.
I hear you, Scott, but you're not quoting my argument. You're quoting someone else's, and it's not about partisanship. You asked the question as to why and how it could undermine black voting strength. If what you say is true, there would have been no reason to dissect Memphis in the way that it was.
Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. In today's video, Laura Coates and Scott Jennings clash on Laura Coates Live over voting rights, racial gerrymandering, and Donald Trump's role in Republican redistricting efforts. As the debate intensifies, Coates pushes back against Jennings' arguments, leading to a tense exchange. Let's take a look at how this heated discussion unfolded.
Democrats scoring a 1-2 punch against Republicans in the redistricting war today in Alabama. A federal court blocked the state from using a GOP-drawn map in the upcoming midterm elections. The three-judge panel called it unfair to black voters, and I should note, 2 of those judges were Trump appointees. Now let's go to South Carolina, where early voting began just today. And the state Senate defied Trump's push for a new map that would have drawn Congressman James Clyburn right out of his district. 14 Republicans voted to kill that plan.
But I can no longer support passage of this bill for one simple reason. South Carolina citizens are going to the polls today. And neither my conscience nor my common sense will allow me to stop an election that is already underway.
The panel's back with me. All right, Shermichael, you know that you risk some wrath from President Trump when you defy his orders. So, did they do?
FYI.
No, he
No,
cannot.
not Article 3. But tell me what you think about the idea of the message they're sending by doing this.
Yeah, look, South Carolina, I'm not surprised. I've known Congressman Clyburn for a very, very long time. I have great admiration for him. And he has built, over decades, relationships with Republicans in that state, including the governor. They like him. That stuff matters. You go to Alabama. The South, I'm a Southerner, there's a complicated history there with black Americans and white Americans. So despite the president's edict to move forward with gerrymandering, a lot of these officials are saying, wait a minute here, our relationships will continue beyond the Trump presidency. And I think many of the political leaders are looking at it through that lens and saying, perhaps this isn't the right approach, the ethical approach to disenfranchise our friends, even though we may politically disagree. That's the way I look at this.
Well, that would give people a little bit more grace, and I think we've seen, in the sense that some people are looking very short-sighted and thinking, you know what, yes, maybe down the road democracy will be questioned, but today I got to stay in office, I'm following Trump.
Well, a lot of people have made that decision that, I'm going to make a party decision. Now, in South Carolina, the election was going on, and so they did have an out, and that's what I think a lot of them were arguing. They may come back and redraw this in 28 and turn it into a 7-0 map. So, it's one seat. Would it be nice to have when the fight for the House is going to be, I think, pretty nip-tuck? Absolutely. Is it the end of the world? No. Will it catch the president's attention that a bunch of Republican office holders in a state that he won by a bajillion points defied his views?
And what's the consequence of that?
Of course it will. Well, what happened in the state of Indiana? Where you had state senators who defied him on what they wanted to do there, and he took out several of them in the Indiana primary. Now, again, the election's going on in South Carolina, so this might get punted down the road, both in terms of dealing with those people and dealing with a new map. But, that's what's going on.
But Alabama was interesting, though, Scott. They didn't necessarily, the courts didn't have to rule the way they did. They're uber conservative judges there, and they decided to, nevertheless, I wouldn't say that.
In fact, let me read you a part. Let me read a part of it.
One of the biggest takeaways from this debate is that courts are increasingly pushing back against aggressive gerrymandering efforts. The Alabama ruling was especially significant because even judges appointed by Donald Trump found evidence of racial discrimination in the state's voting map. That weakens claims that these challenges are purely partisan. Since the Supreme Court's Shelby County decision in 2013 reduced federal oversight of voting laws, several southern states have faced repeated legal battles over district maps that allegedly dilute black voting power. Courts have ordered changes in states like Alabama, Louisiana, and Georgia, highlighting an ongoing pattern. Critics often argue that majority black districts favor Democrats, but these districts were originally created to address decades of political exclusion. The South Carolina case also showed that some Republicans are reluctant to follow every political demand when it could damage trust within their communities. At the end of the day, democracy works best when voters choose their representatives, not when politicians draw maps to choose their voters.
Our way clear to requiring Alabamians to cast their votes in the 2026 elections under a districting plan tainted by intentional race-based discrimination. They didn't necessarily have to worry about it at all. And frankly, the South Carolinians, they saw what happened in Indiana and acted anyway. Did that surprise you?
You know, listen, I'm from the South, and there's a saying that God don't like ugly. And so
I heard that in a long time. My
listen,
grandmother.
Get back in church, okay? Get back in church. So for
You just said they weren't there. The last segment. So, okay, go ahead. Be where you are.
So
Go ahead.
Talarico can reach
Be where you are.
Okay, nevertheless. No, so my point is there clearly are still some reasonable Republicans that are left in their party, nationally and locally, that objected to what has become sort of a heavy-handed approach from Trump and the Supreme Court to undermine black political power all across the South. And, you know, there was a whispering campaign early on after the Voting Rights Act was dismantled that this is likely going to have, and I heard it from Congressman Figures, whose district is one in Alabama that they were trying to draw out, that this is going to backfire on them. And now we're seeing it actually backfire.
Well, how about for Democrats? I want to hear your point, but I'm curious, as a strategist particularly, there had been a lot of concern and hope from Democratic voters that Democrats would play and meet fire with fire. But now that there is a more, let's call it tempered response in terms of South Carolina or Alabama through the courts, does this now disincentivize?
That was fire with fire 3 months ago. The clock has run out on all these primaries. People are already voting in almost every place. Scott was right about that. And in South Carolina, the old man in South Carolina who's been there a long time, Clyburn's brought a lot of money. And that money didn't go to just red places or blue places. It came to the whole state. And folks pretty much agree that the Democrats will take control of at least the House. And they know Clyburn will be in a position of power to bring all the money that he's always brought back to South Carolina. And Clyburn's old school. Clyburn gets along with lots of people down there. He has a fish fry. He's not one of these flame-throwing folks down there. Like, there's still folks that like him down there. I think that's why you saw this.
So if it weren't Clyburn, though, yes, but if it weren't Clyburn, are you saying that they would have done something different? Or is it the fact that, I mean, is it more than just Clyburn's district that was at stake?
I mean, I think we should not lose sight of the fact that this is a long game for Republicans. The undermining of VRA is not just about this particular midterm. It's about midterms. So
How does the Calais case, the VRA case, undermine black political power? All black Americans, all white Americans, all Americans before the Calais case had one vote, and now they all still have the franchise and they have one vote.
Oh, me. Okay, I'm taking
the
this one.
lawyer
There you go.
on
So I was in the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. And I'll tell you, as everyone realizes, that when you dilute the voting power of a particular population, the one person, one vote is essentially a myth. If you tell them that they're going to be separated and can never actually vote for a candidate that they're choosing or have the opportunity to have that candidate elected, that's problematic. And before you give me that squint, don't tell me that Republicans have fewer offices in the New England or wherever. But the crux of the matter is the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was designed to make sure that voting strength was universal. And if you dilute that power through gerrymandering and separating districts, then you do undermine the ability to do that very thing.
Their power
And that's
to do
exactly
what, though?
but to elect a candidate of their choosing, not entitled to the winner, but a candidate of your choosing.
But they're going to go to the polls and they're going to see names on a ballot and they can vote for anybody on that ballot they want. To me, the underpinning of your argument is black political power must be aimed only at one political party. I think the conservative argument here is that black voters, white voters, any voters in any community ought to expect out of both parties an argument, what's best for me as an individual American voter?
Well,
and
your
so to try to
argument
group people together and
is-
say you all are forced to vote for one kind of a candidate, aka Democrats.
I hear you, Scott, but you're not quoting my argument. You're quoting someone else's. And it's not about partisanship. You asked the question as to why and how it could undermine black voting strength. If what you say is true, there would have been no reason to dissect Memphis in the way that it was. No reason to gerrymander district with a goal towards what President Trump spoke about, trying to add particular numbers to one particular side. I think people universally do want one person, one vote to actually be the case. But with gerrymandering, that can't exist. Stand by, everyone. We've got more to talk about. Yeah, it's my show. Last word.
This debate highlights a long-running question in American politics. Does one person, one vote really work when district maps are carefully designed to influence election outcomes? After the 2013 Shelby County decision weakened federal oversight of voting laws, states gained more freedom to redraw district lines without prior approval. That's why voting rights cases have increasingly ended up in court. The Supreme Court's 2023 Allen versus Milligan ruling was a major example. Even with a conservative majority, the court found that Alabama's map likely weakened black voting power. The decision reinforced the idea that discrimination can occur through how districts are drawn, even without explicit language. Supporters of these challenges argue that map design can significantly affect representation. When communities are split across multiple districts, their ability to elect candidates who reflect their interests can be reduced. At its core, the debate isn't about party politics. It's about whether every community has a fair opportunity to make its voice heard, which is one of the central goals of the Voting Rights Act. Are you tired of getting conflicting versions of the same news story? Ground News helps you compare coverage from outlets across the political spectrum so you can see the full picture and make up your own mind.